Verse 246. Two things are established by me: individual objects and realization. There are four principles which constitute the dogmas of logic. I've touched on the dogmas of logic before, but I'm not really an expert in Indian logic, and I don't really want to spend time on it. But it seems that in Indian logic there are four possibilities. We can say that something is either A or not A. So for example, A could be dog, so something is either a dog or it's not a dog. That's straightforward. This is the basis of Greek logic as well. And we can say that something either exists or it doesn't exist. For example, a unicorn, it doesn't exist. A cat exists. So we can see here there's a process of discrimination going on. Logic is about discrimination and building upon these discriminations. But in Indian logic, something can also be its negation. This is quite strange, but I suspect this is trying to accommodate spiritual insight. So for example, in a dream, the unicorn, which doesn't exist, can exist. So it can both exist and not exist. That's when we realise, though, the nature as a dream. And this is the understanding of reality. To those with spiritual insight, everything is of the nature of dream. So, the dog or the cat exists, but also doesn't exist. And then, looking a little bit deeper, we can say, well, it actually makes no sense to describe it as existing and as not existing. So it neither exists nor doesn't exist. And this is the fourth principle of Indian logic. And this is in contrast to the first part of this verse. The Buddha says that he established two things. So there's an important point here. He established two things as opposed to the four principles of logic. Spiritual insight is simple. This is the key point. We can forget all that stuff about logic. We don't have to get our head round it in order to achieve spiritual insight. But it's curious that the Buddha says that two things are established by him: individual objects and realization. We've heard before that there's no such thing as individual objects. They're the product of discrimination. And this is spelled out again in the next verse. There's really only one thing established by the Buddha, and that's realization. But this realization is the realization that there are no individual objects. It's the realization that everything is of the nature of dream. And that, as far as spiritual insight is concerned, we do not discriminate. We do not discriminate into objects, and we don't say things about them, whether they exist or don't exist, and so on. So this is the point. The teaching is simple. All these apparent individual objects are part of overall experiencing, and we don't get sucked into it. We can step back from it. And this is what's spelled out in verse 247. The error, or the world, is discriminated when it is seen as characterized with varieties of forms and figures. When names and forms are removed, self-nature becomes pure, which is the realm of the wise. And that's what logic's about. It's about discrimination into varieties of forms and figures. Names and forms. This is what attracts the attention, a particular form, and then we give it a name or we say something about it. This is spiritual error. And when we don't get caught up in these names and forms, self-nature becomes pure. And what that means is our sense of being is no longer being siphoned off. It's no longer being siphoned off into this whirlpool of activity which is apparently going on. And once we can backtrack from that siphoning off, we're in this pure realm, which is the realm of the wise. And we can rest in our own sense of being once again. And this is the theme of the next few verses as well.